Hey, what's going on, everybody? Thank you for watching my video today. Now, the NBA trade deadline is fast approaching. At 3 p.m. this Thursday, teams will no longer be able to make any trades, but 2 days before, we've seen some major trades over the past few days, and there were two trades today that I'm here to discuss, and I wasn't a big fan of either of them. I thought both Portland and the Kings who were involved in these trades, Portland and New Orleans making that C.J. McCollum trade, as well as that Kings-Pacers swap of Domantas Sabonis and Tyrese Haliburton. I was not a fan of it from the side of Portland or Sacramento, and that's just par of the course for both of these teams who have been making poor decisions for especially Sacramento a long time, but Portland the last 2 years. I made a video the other day addressing the Norman Powell-Robert Covington trade, how I thought this was the end of an era for Damian Lillard and C.J. McCollum in Portland. And only a few days later, C.J. has been traded to Portland. I'll start with that trade right here. Now, just to reiterate a few things I said in my other video the other day, Portland made a trade. They traded Norman Powell and Robert Covington to the Clippers, and they got very little back after giving up 2 first-round picks to get Covington, and they had just signed Norman Powell to a mega extension, 5-year, I think $90 million this past offseason. Looked like he was there to stay, but they got rid of them to get under the tax is what some reports are saying. Whether they got under the tax or not, they just traded CJ, so they would have gotten under the tax either way. I would have liked this C.J. McCollum trade a lot more if they hadn't made that Norman Powell-Robert Covington trade. But now you lose, not only you lose Powell for practically nothing, but now you're losing C.J. for almost nothing. Now, I understand that, so the full trade was they trade C.J. to New Orleans for Josh Hart, who's a player I like a lot, great hustle rebounder, fantastic player at Villanova, was a big part of their championship team, so I like him a lot, good defender, brings the energy. But besides him, they didn't get all that much. They got a first-round pick, but it's protected this year between picks 5 and 14, which is the problem. I'm gonna get into why. And they also got Tomas Satoransky, a solid point guard in the past who's struggled this year. Didi Luzauda and Nickeil Alexander-Walker, 2 younger players who aren't exactly lighting the world on fire this season, along with a few second-round picks. So a lot of pieces for CJ in this swap for New Orleans. Now, looking at the Blazers side of things, they've got this interim GM, Joe Cronin. I didn't even know who he was until a few days ago when I had to Google him after he made that atrocious Powell trade. He's filling in for Neil O'Shea, who had to resign. The longtime GM resigned after the whole workplace harassment scandal, not to mention he was doing a bad job before he had to resign this past fall. But they're allowing this interim guy who's not even the permanent GM to make all these wheel-and deal-and trades, and it's messing up the franchise, in my opinion. Now, you can argue that they're ultimately going to trade Damian Lillard either this Thursday or as soon as this offseason, as soon as the playoffs end come June. And that very may well be the case. But if you're going to trade all your core assets, you've got to get something back. And I don't think they got very much back for CJ and Norman Powell at all. And when you look at McCollum, yes, he is on the wrong side of 30. He's dealt with a collapsed lung this year. His defense was already bad. It's going to get worse as he ages. But this is still a guy who's averaged 20 points per game every year of his career since his third year in the league, which was the 15-16 season. We're in the 21-22 season, obviously. So that's about 7 or 8 years of great production from CJ. And New Orleans, they're making a playoff push. They're trying to get at least into the play-in game. They smell blood in the water with the Lakers, the Clippers. The Clippers have no Paul George right now, and it's unclear if he'll be coming back. The Lakers are obviously a mess. And maybe even Minnesota, a younger team, maybe they slip up or have an injury. So New Orleans is just trying to get in that race, and they're hoping if Zion comes back, whether it's next year or even this year, now they have 2 really good scorers opposite him in Ingram and McCollum. Good role players like Jonas, Devontae Graham, the rookie Herb Jones. So they're kind of starting to build a real roster around Zion if he doesn't try to approach like a trade request. But that's a whole other story for another day. But the point of this trade to me is that Portland got pretty much nothing for a guy who's been a cornerstone of their franchise for a long time, was an integral part of their playoff runs, especially obviously the biggest playoff run they had, that Western Finals run. He was incredible that year. And I'm not saying don't deal him, because in the amount I think they should have made this trade. I would have been a lot more comfortable with the trade if they hadn't already traded Norman Powell as well. I think it's a little weird that they got rid of both of them and leaves them in a rough spot if they're going to keep, especially if they're going to keep Lillard going forward, which it's unclear if that will be the case. But then even the pick they got is protected 5 to 14. So think about it this way: if the Pelicans don't make the playoffs, even if they're in the play-in game, they're still top 14. So if they aren't one of the 8 best teams in the West, it would take the Pelicans getting extremely lucky in the lottery like they did when they were able to get the number 1 pick and acquire Zion Williamson for Portland to get that pick this year. But it's very likely the case that New Orleans finishes between 5 and 14. So that pick doesn't convey this year. And that's the only pick Portland got in this trade for McCollum. And if you look ahead to next year, assuming Zion's situation doesn't continue to get weirder and weirder, and when you look at the landscape of the West right now, there's a good chance New Orleans finishes at least outside the top 10. So you're pretty much trading a long-time standout for your franchise for Josh Hart, who's a great role player, but he's not that effective on a rebuilding team, which it looks like where Portland's headed. Maybe Nickeil Alexander-Walker turns into something. I don't personally see it, but I'm not going to pretend I've watched a ton of Pelicans games, but from what I've seen of him, he doesn't scream future star to me. And a first-round pick that isn't a top 10 pick most likely, unless you get really lucky. That's not enough, especially when you traded 2 first-round picks in Gary Trent Jr. for Powell and Covington and didn't get anything close to that value back for them a year later. So they've pretty much traded. Not to mention, I just remember this off the top of my head, they also traded Larry Nance Jr., who they gave up not a high first-round pick, but a first-round pick of some value for this offseason to upgrade their defense. He was really good in Cleveland for the previous few seasons. Dealt with some injuries this year, but he's another piece the Pelicans get in this trade that's a big asset that could really help them down the road. So if they are to become a playoff hopeful team next year or even this year. So all in all, I think this is a terrible trade for Portland, and I don't know what they're doing. They need to hire a real GM as soon as possible. Like, there's really no defending what Cronin has done, even just in the past week as the interim GM. I'm not the type to say, I'm smarter than NBA GMs. Like, obviously, I'd probably not know what I was doing, but at the same time, like, I would have never made these trades. I think a lot of NBA fans would also agree that these were terrible moves. But speaking of terrible moves, that brings me to the other bad trade of the day. And that's the deal between the Kings and the Pacers swapping Domantas Sabonis for Tyrese-Haliburton. Now, I was in favor of the Pacers going all in on a rebuild, tearing it down. I liked their Karis LeVert trade. I thought LeVert made a lot more sense for the Cavs right now than the Pacers roster. Now, I was concerned a little bit about their trading of Sabonis, though. I wasn't sure if they were going to get a proper return for him. I was worried they would just get random picks that we don't know when they'll convey or that we don't know how high necessarily they'll be because it could have been from a contending team like the Grizzlies, for example, I was thinking might have happened. But no, the Kings came in, the Sacramento Kings, and did their Sacramento Kings things. They traded Tyrese-Haliburton, Tristan Thompson, and Buddy Hield to the Pacers. They got back Domantas Sabonis, the 2-time All-Star, as well as Jeremy Lamb, Justin Holiday, and I believe a second-round pick. Now, there's a lot of moving parts in this trade, but I think it's an easy win for the Pacers because, you can say they didn't get picks to rely on down the road, but I think Tyrese-Haliburton's a home run, and I think he's a lot more likely to pan out as a future All-Star than any random pick you'll get. Now, I was expecting the Kings to maybe, if they're going to trade Haliburton, I thought it would have been in a bigger deal, like maybe a Ben Simmons type trade, although I don't think that was logical for the Kings, but I was hoping as a Sixers fan it would happen. And a kind of similar weird trade here happened with Sabonis. Now, when Haliburton's been the only point guard in Sacramento, he's been incredible. We saw what he did against the Sixers in that one game a few weeks back, but he's been, he had 17 assists last night. I was looking at his game log. Like, he's a real point guard. He's been playing the 2-guard opposite Fox. And, I think the mindset around the league is that this should have been Haliburton's team and Fox should have been moved. He's been a lot more inefficient this year. His three-point shooting has gone down a cliff the last 2 years, and he's really relying on his athleticism. I think Haliburton's just a smarter player, if that makes sense. And the Pacers get him now. And I'm not to say that Sabonis can't hold a candle to Haliburton. He's a great passing big. He's a good rebounder, can score in the low post. Sometimes he can hit threes. But for the Kings of all teams to be the team that not only sends a potential all-star point guard away to get Sabonis, but it doesn't change their destiny as a team. I would have loved Haliburton and Sabonis together if they had traded maybe Fox and Hield and some picks, or Barnes maybe would have been that trade. That would have made sense to me if I was a Kings fan, but now you got Fox and Sabonis and, Rashawn Holmes. The main reason the Pacers were looking to move Sabonis, besides a rebuild, was that the front court of Sabonis and Miles Turner was pretty redundant. You basically had 2 centers out there. And it's really no different with Rashawn Holmes. He's just a slightly worse version of Miles Turner. And you can argue that, oh, Holmes can just become a bench player now. You can put Sabonis at the center position. But then you don't have as much rim protection. So at the end of the day, the team for the Kings now, they don't even have Buddy Hield to make some threes anymore. They already got rid of Bogdan Bogdanovic a few years back. You look at their imminent future, I mean, sure, they have their own first-round picks, but a core of Fox, Sabonis, and Harrison Barnes, I think, is going nowhere fast. But on the conversing side for the Pacers, I believe they have their first-round selections. Now you have a great young point guard in Haliburton. Buddy Hield he doesn't necessarily fit the mold of a rebuild. He's kind of older. He's closing in on 30 years of age, but he's a great outside shooter. He already has the chemistry with Haliburton, you would figure. You lose Holiday and Lamb, but they're just veteran guys at the end of the day. They're not really helping you long term. You have Duarte. Miles Turner you can keep now. You can keep him as the rim protector. He's one of the best shot blocking centers in the league. And if TJ Warren can ever get healthy, we know he's a 20-point scorer on the wing as well. People like to talk about his bubble run being a fluke, but he was already playing great before the bubble with both the Pacers and the Suns. It's just a matter of health with him. Now, if the Pacers bottom out the rest of the year, they keep playing as bad as they have, maybe they get lucky in the lottery. Maybe they can find a franchise guy and all of a sudden reinvigorate their franchise with Haliburton, who I think is a potential future all-star. And now, so the Pacers, I think, now have a lot more roster flexibility. I think the Kings have way less. I'm not sure who's going to be able to make a three-point shot consistently on this team anymore because they traded Hield, as I mentioned. So all in all, this was a confoundingly stupid trade for the Kings, but that's their MO. That's what they do. They make stupid trades. They don't make the playoffs. They haven't made the playoffs since I was 3 years old, and that's how it is in Sacramento. Love this trade for the Pacers. Rick Carlisle, I think, he may be an older coach, but I think he will be able to get this Pacers team at least back in the playoffs in the next 2 years or so. Well, that's going to do it for my video today. We'll see if any other crazy trades happen this coming trade deadline. I mean, you still got this Harden-Simmons trade, but obviously Damian Lillard, Bradley Beal. There's plenty of rumors out there of whether or not these players will be staying in place. So we'll have to see what happens. It's going to be an interesting trade deadline. I'm excited to talk about it in the coming days. But other than that, thank you guys for watching my video today. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and have a great rest of your day.